Hello Year 12. In this short presentation, our overall aim will be to plan and write an answer to the following essay question. How effectively did Elizabeth I exploit her sources of income? Before we zoom in on the essay question itself, I just want to take this opportunity to give you some generic reminders when approaching an essay for our course. Now, these reminders I've repeated in lessons previously, and I think it would be worthwhile just to perhaps jot these down on a separate piece of paper and have them beside you when you are writing your essay as a point of reference, just to make sure that you are incorporating some of these tips. So if we start with the introduction, you should try to ensure that your introduction addresses the question focus head on. Set a brief context to the question, introduce the factors and themes you'll be discussing, a minimum of 3, and end your introduction with your thesis. That is, what will your line of argument be running through your answer? Don't sit on the fence, be explicit and to the point. Try to avoid a shopping list approach, starting each paragraph with firstly, secondly, and then. Instead, try to open each paragraph with a clear point and judgment. Remember, your opening paragraph or theme must be the most significant, important, effective factor, and the one you have set out in your thesis. The remaining factors that follow this must be evaluated in relation to this first factor. This is called relative importance. The writing of history, remember, is not fact. It is opinion, an ongoing debate. Therefore, avoid definitive language and statements that make your ideas seem like there can't possibly be an alternative. Instead, try to incorporate a wide range of tentative words when putting forward your evaluations and analyses. Words such as arguably, possibly, probably, maybe, potentially, could, might, perhaps are appropriate for writing a history essay. Another simple tip to remember is to ensure the last line in each paragraph links directly back to the question. And finally, something that I have come across previously, remember your essay must not become a knowledge dump of everything you know about the topic. The examiners will expect and rightly assume that you know your onions. Any contextual knowledge you use must be relevant to the question focus, and you should aim to link it explicitly to your argument. Some background to the financial situation inherited by Elizabeth. Her father's military exploits in the 1540s had cost more than his ordinary income, and the continuation of garrisoning the border with Scotland and the capture of Boulogne in France had put a huge strain on royal finances. As a result, the debasement of coinage, which had started under Henry VIII and then continued in the reign of Edward VI under the Duke of Somerset, led to inflation. Inflation was to become an ongoing and prevalent issue throughout her reign, and something which I'll explore with you in a lot more detail in the video that follows this one, reviewing the whole of the financial topic for Elizabeth. The enclosure of land in the 1540s had led to a rise in the cost of food and goods. Between 1541 and 1600, England's population had risen by 40%. Therefore, as demand for goods increased, so too did prices. Wages in the main, however, remained stagnant. Poor harvests and influenza at the end of Mary's reign only worsened the challenging economic situation at the time. So on coming to the throne, Elizabeth inherited a debt of £227,000 from her half-sister. £100,000 of this was owed to the Antwerp Exchange at an interest rate of 14%. Therefore, an indebted crown was clearly an endangered crown. Elizabeth's income was obtained in 2 ways. The fundamental way for Elizabeth to receive income was through what was called her ordinary income. Now, this was income that Elizabeth received through her estates, custom duties, profits of justice, and patronage. The other main way in which Elizabeth received income was through extraordinary income, and this was essentially parliamentary subsidies. As we saw previously, Elizabeth inherited an indebted crown. With question marks over her legitimacy and a country in social and religious turmoil, Elizabeth recognised that on the one hand, she would need to exploit her sources of income to tackle the mounting debt, while simultaneously being mindful of not causing civil unrest and further alienating any doubters to her authority. And it's this last point really which perhaps makes her exploitation of her sources of income not as effective as she could have, as she opted to seek peace and maintain stability at the start of her reign, as opposed to fully maximising her sources of income. In planning and preparing to answer this essay question, look back over pages 219 to 221 of your textbooks and the notes that you have made on those pages this week as part of your homework. You should take the 3 topics in red on this screen as your themes. The remaining 2 should be explored in order to give you some broader contextual knowledge. Perhaps pause the video at this point and look at the notes that I've developed for my 3 themes here on Crown lands, parliamentary tax and custom duties. Now you'll see from my notes here on this screen that all of the contextual knowledge that I've incorporated here is specific and relevant to the question focus on how effective she was in exploiting her sources of income. Now in each category, you'll see that there were some positives, some effective exploitation of these sources of income, but I've also included some bullet points in here for you to consider in terms of evaluating and analysing and weighing up just how effective she was in each of these categories. And hopefully this will lead you towards making a final decision as to overall how effective she was in exploiting these sources of income, but more importantly, in which area she perhaps was more effective in exploiting her sources of income in relation to the other factors on this screen. How effectively did Elizabeth I exploit her sources of income? Now we're approaching the point where you'll write up your essay. Now on the previous slide, I highlighted a range of contextual knowledge that would be relevant in answering this question. Your job now is to weigh up these factors and decide just how effective Elizabeth was in exploiting these sources of income. And of these 3 factors, which one she was most effective in exploiting. On the final slide of this presentation, you will see a model introduction. However, you need to bear in mind that this introduction is my thesis, that is my opinion. That does not mean it is definitive. You may, and I hope you do, decide upon a different thesis. However, use it as a starting point in helping you to frame your answer. You'll also notice beside the model introduction some of the key tips and pointers that are highlighted at the start of this presentation in terms of getting that structure right for the introduction. Good luck, and I look forward to reading your final essays.